Creepy presents Do Not Enter the Mirrors. Written by Kyle Harrison, performed by Michelle Kane, and produced by Steve Blizin.
If you visit the Denier Funhouse, do not enter the mirrors. My best friend's sophomore year was Heather Bradford. She was preppy, fun, energizing. In short, everything I wasn't. And what made Heather so endearing was that she was a friend to everyone. She never judged anyone because of what they looked like or what sort of talent they had. She was the friend everybody wished they had, and for some reason, she chose me. I wasn't popular, I wasn't pretty, I was just Janet. Teased and picked on by kids every day. Heather was one of the few bright spots I had left. She encouraged me to try new things that I never really knew I could do, like join the swim team or start a campaign for class president. I lost, but she still said it was trying that mattered. It was her idea to go to the county fairgrounds that October, not mine. "It'll be fun! Get you out of the house and your mind off midterms," she told me. The Denier Fun Grounds are the most active place this side of Tacoma, with music, games, and fresh food. But they are also extremely expensive, so I declined. Heather didn't take no for an answer, though, and she bought us tickets anyway. "Can't back out now," she teased. I felt like I was being forced to have a good time at first, but Heather's personality was easily infectious. I was laughing, eating cotton candy, and standing in line for teacup rides in no time. "Hey, let's go check out that funhouse. That's new," she told me. I didn't bother telling her the attraction had been a staple of the fair since we were both in grade school. By this time, I was pumped up on sugar and having a good time. Besides, the massive assortment of traps and mazes looked like it could be fun. An absurdly tall clown dressed in a multicolored plaid suit stood at the door, waiting for anyone who dared to enter. I guessed that the attraction was supposed to resemble a haunted house of some kind, because the side of the front entrance had a massive list of instructions plastered on the outside of it. "Before you go in, you have to agree to the terms," the clown told us. Heather and I skimmed over it. Pretty basic stuff, if you ask me. Must be this tall to ride, not liable for accidents, nothing out of the ordinary. Then Heather saw something that made her chuckle. "What's this one supposed to mean? Don't enter the mirrors? You got Wonderland back there or something?" she giggled. The clown squinted at us. It was kind of hard to take the costumed employee seriously, honestly. "Some of the set pieces are antiques. The owner specified that they shouldn't be bothered, or the person responsible could face a steep fine," he said. We straightened up our faces and saluted smartly, crawling into the twisty entrance of the funhouse. "He doesn't get paid enough," I giggled, as we made it to the first room. It was one of those typical cord mazes where the large plush pillars moved about, and we had fun bouncing against them, tripping over one another, and finally reaching the next obstacle. We caught our breath and stepped into the dark room, giggling at the conveyor belt we were now riding on, and Heather said, "This is pretty cool." I didn't respond until we made it to the other side, too out of breath to argue as we made it to the final room. This chamber was even darker than before, but both of us immediately recognized it as the mirror maze, and Heather frowned as the multiple reflections of herself stared back. "How in the world are we supposed to not touch these? This is insane," she commented. Slowly, I got a bearing on the floor and noticed there was a soft lining. "There! If we keep fixated on that, we can find our way out," I told her, and then gestured for her to go one way and I could go the other. "It'll be easy. See you on the other side." Heather nodded and disappeared around the corner to the other side of the maze as I focused on the lining. It was still a little disorienting, especially because occasionally the funhouse would cause these pink flashing lights to cascade across the entire room. But somehow, after about 6 minutes of stumbling about, I found my way to the exit. "Wow, that was crazy! What fun!" I said as I rushed to the side of the funhouse. It was then that I realized I was talking to myself. I blushed as a few passing guests looked at me, and then turned back towards the exit and waited for Heather to come out, thinking it would only be a minute or two. After 10 minutes went by, I tried to go and get her, but the exit door refused to budge. So I decided to walk around to the front, figuring she must have given up and come back out the other way. "Hey, did you see my friend go by?" I asked the clown. The tall employee tilted his head and smiled. "Nope." But I wasn't paying attention. "Was she supposed to?" he asked. "Look, bozo, we went in together a few minutes ago, but she hasn't come out. I think she might have gotten lost in the last room," I told him. The clown made his most unsympathetic frowny face and remarked, "Well, if you want, you can go in and find her." I nodded in thanks, about to do just that, when he stopped me cold and remarked, "But nothing is for free. It's 2 more tickets, miss." I sighed and rummaged through my pockets, suddenly realizing that we had spent our last tickets on this frustrating attraction. "Fine, I'll be back," I told him, running across the fair to the ticket counter. To be honest, at this point, I was a little worried about Heather. I knew that occasionally she had some panic attacks in school. Last semester, she literally curled up in a ball on the gym floor because a boy broke up with her. I was sure she was in trouble in that funhouse. I used what little money I had left to grab the necessary tickets and ran back as fast as I could, part of me hoping desperately that she was already out and waiting for me. But she wasn't, and for some reason, stepping into that funhouse a second time, I was really scared. I've never really been without her for a long period of time. We are thick as thieves, I guess you could say. And maneuvering amid those flimsy obstacles to make it to the mirror maze without her by my side, it just felt wrong. Everything about the place did now that I was alone. The maze especially. Staring at those hundreds of mind-boggling reflections of myself, I worried I may not be able to find her at all. "Heather? Are you there? I'm sorry I went out earlier. I'm here to help." I called to her, hoping for some kind of response. I followed the right path, the one she had taken into the dark and winding hall of mirrors, searching for any glimmer of a reflection from her. It was a little more difficult this time to make out anything because I wasn't keeping my eyes on the lining. Seeing all those myriads of reflections made me feel dizzy, so I called out to her again. Was she hurt? Having an anxiety attack? I started to rush through the maze. Then I slowed down as I realized I had reached a dead end in the shimmering glass and saw there was something on the reflective surface, a handprint. Had Heather made it this far and then turned around? I reached out and touched the prints, running my fingers along their edges and then squinted my eyes. It looked like the mirror was shimmering the way an ocean would. I took a step back, surprised that my eyes were playing tricks on me, and then realized that my reflection did not do the same. I felt a lump in my throat as the room got a little darker, and then those annoying iridescent lights flashed around, and suddenly the reflection moved toward me. I didn't even know how to react. How can you when you're in a situation that bizarre? Before I knew what was happening, this doppelganger was on top of me, wrapping her fingers around my throat and trying to choke the life out of me. It took me a moment to register what was happening as I gasped for breath. This evil version of myself was so much stronger, so confident in their abilities. Everything I was not. I knew that if I didn't fight back, it would be the end for me. I jabbed my fingers against her eyes and screamed, thinking of Heather. Had this been what had happened to my best friend? Some funhouse ghost was doing her in? The thought of her being subdued by such force drove me to fight. I didn't want to become the next victim of this murderous mirror. I pushed my doppelganger back against the glass where it had come from, and then with all my strength, slammed their head against it. Shards of reflective sharp glass cracked as we fought, pushing each other back and forth in the cramped space as my evil twin grabbed a piece of broken glass, eager to slice my throat. I dodged the first attempt, the sliver of material striking against my forearm as I slammed her against the mirror again, and this time the entire thing shattered. Suddenly, the world around us seemed to collapse. She fell back into the strange mirror world from where she had come, trapped. I was still standing on the other side, my clothes soaked in blood and scars running across my hands and arms. I almost didn't believe it had happened. Then I saw that strange, evil replica trying desperately to press against the glass and get back out, and I screamed. I ran out of the maze, stumbling and trying to avoid getting close to any of the mirrors as I did. The reflection of myself kept pace with me the entire time. That same bitterness and cruelty evident every time I glanced towards the replica. I think I ran harder than I ever have in my life to escape. Once outside, I coughed up a little blood and looked at the cuts on my arm, still in disbelief. What had happened to Heather? I ran to the entrance, demanding that the employee get their manager. My friend is still lost in there. The fair's gonna close in 15 minutes. The clown looked at me as though I had lost my mind. Fine, stay here. But instead, a moment later, they returned with security. As I was rudely escorted out, I desperately tried to explain that my friend had anxiety issues. She could be trapped in there all night, I explained. Rides will be checked before the final shutdown. Your friend probably ditched you and went home separately, the guard said, gazing at my scars and remarking, You get in some kind of fight with her? I didn't even bother to explain. I was too exhausted and frightened. I called my mom to pick me up and waited to see if maybe, just maybe, Heather would come out too. My mom said we couldn't wait any longer and she was sure Heather would be fine. I texted Heather's mom but never got a response. Sleep was all but impossible. I avoided mirrors as much as I could, afraid that strange evil twin would resurface. The next day, I heard nothing from her. Her mom called, frantic that we hadn't heard anything. I thought maybe you girls had a sleepover. Then I got a call and found out her vehicle was towed last night. I tried to go back to the fair a few days later. I would have gone sooner, but school got in the way. No one had heard anything from Heather, so I figured maybe I could go and see if maybe there was something left inside that bizarre mirror maze. The handprint, maybe. Anything to prove that something horrible had happened to her. But to my surprise, the funhouse was now closed. I saw a man locking the door and shaking his head, upset about something. Sir, what happened? Why is this attraction now closed? I asked cautiously as he turned to me. Too many complaints. There were people running from the attraction, screaming Bloody Mary like they had seen a ghost. Even one said they had a teen girl about your age. The guy said. I tried my best not to vomit as I realized it could be Heather. The man kept rambling. I tried to tell the boss there was something strange about those mirrors. Got them from a disreputable source anyway. Said that it was an antique and it would add to the authenticity of the funhouse. But I knew. Those mirrors felt evil from the moment I put them up. That's why we had the rules. But all I could think about was my friend. I had to try and get her back. And that night, I did something I never thought I would just for that purpose. I waited until my parents were asleep and drove to the fair to break in. I don't think I was really imagining I would get caught. I was focused on getting into the funhouse and saving Heather. I found a twisted tree just on the other side of the water slide. The funhouse was still locked up, of course, but I had also brought my dad's bolt cutters from home to get in. Since the funhouse was now shut down, there was nothing for me to find my way through that maze. I had stupidly left my phone at home, thinking that if I did, my mom would never realize I had left it all. But now, here in this dark, cramped space, amid supernatural mirrors that could harm me, I wished I hadn't. I did what I didn't want to do and reached out my hand, aimlessly searching for a rough surface to guide me. Touching the mirrors now felt wrong, like I was inciting evil to come and find me. I hurried, calling out to Heather to try and respond to my desperate pleas. Then at last, a glimmer of hope. I saw something shimmer, and my eyes adjusted to the shadows. It was her. "Heather, thank God," I said as she ran up to the reflective surface. She was desperate for me to help her out. "All right, stand back," I told her, remembering how shattering the glass had forced my evil twin inside last time. I felt like I had to damage the strange mirror somehow to free my friend. I slammed the bolt cutters just one time to cause the reflective surface to splinter. And then I asked her, "Can you make it through?" Heather pressed against the fractal patterns and then motioned that I would need to help. I immediately responded and pressed my fingers in the cracks, feeling the strange, ethereal surge of pain course through my body. The mirror was fighting back my attempt to save her. I fought back against the mirror, pushing as hard as I could to squeeze my fingers and intertwine with hers. The reflective surface of that other world surged and shimmered, and I felt her skin touch mine. "We can do this! We're almost there!" I said excitedly. She screamed in agony as we pushed through the shards of glass, her face and body being cut and sliced, as the mirror struggled to hold on to its prized victim. Then at last, she was lunging forward and pushed me backward, as though the strange, otherworldly thing had chosen to spit her out after all. She coughed and shivered, hardly able to move as I helped her to her feet and desperately scanned the darkness to find the way out. Finally, we found our way to the fairgrounds, and I called out at the top of my lungs for help. Help! Heather was hardly breathing, too tired from the loss of blood to stand up, and collapsed to the cobblestone path beneath us. Finally, a security guard came around and shined his flashlight straight in our faces, looking at us like we were just a bunch of vandals. He used his walkie-talkie to contact the police, and my friend and I clung to one another as emergency services came. Heather was taken to the ICU, and I was grounded. My parents didn't understand at all why we had gone out to sneak into the fair when we had just been there the other day. I didn't bother explaining any of it. All they saw was what they wanted to see. I was just happy to get my best friend back. A few days passed, and I pulled out all the stops with my parents to get a chance to drive up to the hospital and see her. Heather had had to have some facial recovery surgery from the many scars the mirror had caused to her skin. "She'll be going home tomorrow, but seeing a friendly face couldn't hurt," her mom said encouragingly. So, after finishing all my chores plus extra schoolwork, Mom took me up there and I used the last of my allowance to grab her a necklace. She had lost hers in the maze. Entering the room, I smiled hesitantly at my friend. Heather barely registered a grin, but gestures for me to sit down. "Sorry I haven't been by. It's been crazy at home. Are you okay?" I paused and then realized that was a stupid question. Of course she wasn't. Anyway, I brought you this. I passed her the necklace. What is it for? She asked as she took it. I gave her a crooked smile. Don't be silly. It's our friendship locket. I just wanted to get you a new one since we didn't get a chance to find the old one, I chided her. Oh, yes, of course. Heather smiled and put it down to the side of the bed. Suddenly the room felt very, very cold as I had a realization hit me. You weren't wearing it on the other side of the reflection, I said as I looked at her. She didn't say anything. Her cold stare was all I needed to know. I stood up and hurried out of the room, making up an excuse as to why I couldn't stay, and then slowly hyperventilated in the nearby restroom. This was crazy. I was just imagining things. My best friend was just a little shaken up, that's all. I recomposed myself and looked in the mirror, trying to give myself a pep talk that it was all going to be fine. Then behind me, I saw Heather standing in the doorway of her room, with a look that told me I wasn't wrong. A mischievous grin played across her face in the reflective surface, and she raised one finger to her mouth to signify I needed to keep quiet. All I did was nod and leave. Who could I tell? Who would believe something like this? All I know is that after that day, Heather stopped talking to me. She stopped being the Heather I knew. Deep down, I knew, of course. This wasn't my Heather at all. I had brought back something else entirely.